Hello, friends and book lovers. Welcome to the 2021 virtual Gaithersburg Book Festival. I'm Phil Kaminsky, and I'll be your host for tonight's exciting mystery presentation. Before we continue, I'd like to ask you to support today's authors by purchasing their books from our bookseller partner, Politics and Prose. When you consider the past year and all the hardships that each of us has had to face, it's easy to understand why supporting local and independent businesses, as well as each other, is so important. Purchase links can be found in today's presentation description. Furthermore, we also want to extend a huge thank you to our 2021 featured sponsor, the David and Michael Blair Family Foundation, for all of their generous support and help. Okay, let's get started. Today, we have three amazing authors who are here to talk about their latest mysteries, which features some observant kids who sense that something is very wrong in their worlds, and they decide to take on the challenge of solving the mysteries. In Premeditated Myrtle, award-winning author Elizabeth C. Buntz introduces us to a brilliant young investigator ready to take on hard cases and maddening Victorian rules for young ladies of quality in order to earn her place among the most daring and acclaimed amateur detectives of her time. Elizabeth grew up on a steady diet of Sherlock Holmes, Trixie Belden, and Quincy M.E. She always played the lead prosecutor in mock trials. She has never had a governess, and no one has ever accused her of being irrepressible, but a teacher did once call her argumentative, which was entirely untrue, and she can prove it. Rebel in the Library of Ever continues Zeno Alexander's acclaimed middle-grade fantasy series with a dangerous takeover of the magical library as our heroine fights to make knowledge free for everyone. Zeno spent years exploring the world's libraries before settling down in his lavish underground bunker, where he regularly hosts exquisite dinner parties and tends to his collection of extinct plants. His friendship with famous librarian Lenora has turned into a series of biographical works devoted to chronicling her adventures. From New York Times bestselling author Gordon Korman comes Unplugged, a hilarious novel about a group of kids forced to unplug at a wellness camp. This is where they find intrigue, adventure, and a whole lot of chaos. Gordon published his first book at the age of 14 and since then has written more than 90 middle grade and teen novels. His books have been translated into 32 languages and have sold over 30 million copies worldwide. Favorites include the New York Times best-selling Ungifted, Super Gifted, The Unteachables, Pop, Schooled, and the Mastermind series. Moderating today's book discussion is John Morogiello. John is an award-winning playwright, writer, and artistic director of Best Medicine Rep Theater Company. His plays, Engaging Shaw and Blame It on Beckett, have both been produced off-Broadway. John's articles have been published in the Washington Independent Review of Books, American Theater, and DC Theater Scene. Welcome to the program, everyone.
All right, welcome to Sleuths and Sidekicks. We've got three amazing authors here, which we just heard the introductions to, their bios, and now hopefully we will get to see them face to face. First is Zeno Alexander, author of Rebel in the Library of Ever. Second is Elizabeth C. Buntz, author of Premeditated Myrtle, and also Gordon Korman, the author of Unplugged. And I read all three of these books, I got to tell you, and absolutely loved them. So why don't we go in alphabetical order here, and you can tell us a little bit about what your books are about. Zeno, tell us about Rebel in the Library of Ever.
Rebel in the Library of Ever is a sequel to The Library of Ever. It picks up a year after our young heroine Lenora first visits this amazing otherworldly library that exists outside of space and time, and gets a job there at the help desk. In the first book, she's learning to defend freedom of knowledge and going on a lot of wild and crazy adventures to defend the library against those who want to destroy knowledge. And then in the second book, Rebel in the Library of Ever, she returns to the library after a year and discovers that the forces of darkness who are seeking to destroy knowledge have taken over the library. So it's her job to lead a rebel movement to win the library back for the librarians. So that's...
Yeah, it's an absolutely fantastic book, tremendously creative. And I've got to say, it probably has my favorite simile of all time in it. I'm paraphrasing here. Like one of those TV programs where grown-ups worry about losing their job. I was like, yes, I absolutely adored that. Elizabeth, what is Premeditated Myrtle about?
Premeditated Myrtle is the first book in the Myrtle Hardcastle Mysteries series from Algonquin Young Readers, which is followed up by book 2, How to Get Away with Myrtle. And this fall, we are going to be celebrating the release of book 3, Cold-Blooded Myrtle. And I just yesterday turned in book 4 in Myrtle Peril. So these are the tales of a 12-year-old girl who is obsessed with the new Victorian sciences of criminology. So toxicology and crime scene analysis. And when her neighbor dies under mysterious circumstances, Myrtle takes it upon herself to prove that it was murder and solve the crime, even if no one else believes her, including her father, who is the local prosecuting solicitor. That's the first one, and so they're all set in the 1890s. The first 3 books are in 1893, and then the calendar has just turned over to 1894. And Myrtle is joined on her misadventures in Victorian criminology by her unflappable governess, Miss Judson, and a highly opinionated cat named Peony, who has something to say about every scene in the book. So they've been great fun. They celebrate curiosity and wonder and my personal nerdy love of historical and scientific trivia. So, and Premeditated has been nominated for an Edgar Award. And as of right now, it's just nominated. By the time this airs, we will know who won. So that's nerve-wracking and exciting all at once. Very, very, very big honor.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I mean, honestly, you can't go wrong when your cover is illustrated by Brett Hellquist, honestly.
Right? Right.
Yeah,
they're amazing.
Yeah, the minute you see the book, it's like, ooh, 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 ooh. Yeah, so not to judge it by its cover. Inside is pretty good, too. In fact, your book has a sentence so perfect, I wish I'd written it. And when Myrtle complains about the other girls in the neighborhood having a dismal lack of interest in viscera, laughed out loud. It's just a spectacular phrase. You're really, and what was the other one about? When her boot heel hit the moonlit pavement. It was just gorgeously written. Really lovely.
Thank you.
Gordon, tell us about Unplugged.
Okay, and I will hold it up just like everybody is doing it. So I got the idea for Unplugged. My editor every summer goes on a wellness retreat to this kind of, super earthy, crunchy wellness camp. And she calls it the healthiest place on earth. It's got to be, right? It's exercise 24/7. All the food is health food. Weird spa treatments like getting your whole body packed in hot mud, like that kind of thing. But the other thing she loves about it, it's totally unplugged. No technology, no phones, no computers, no TVs. If it's got a screen, it is out. And she loves it. I get that. But as she was telling me about it, I just keep thinking to myself, any kid would absolutely, positively hate being sentenced to an entire summer at the oasis of mind and body wellness. So my what if just became, what if a bunch of kids got sent to a place like this? And not that I'm a terrible person, but sometimes as a writer, you just have to be a little bit, cruel. So I asked myself, like, who would be the worst kid on the face of the planet to send to this oasis? And I kept thinking about like Silicon Valley, like what if your dad invented Google, or something like that, and you got sent to this place where you're not even allowed to have a phone or look at a screen. So I created Jet Baronoff, whose father is the founder of Fuego, the largest tech platform on earth. And he is sent to the oasis where, basically his head like explodes. And that's where the intrigue begins, because this wellness center is not what it seems. And there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes at the oasis of mind and body wellness. It's not all just wellness anymore.
Well, and what's also fascinating about your book, whereas the other two are, there's definitely a mystery component to it. Yours all begins in a slightly different way, where it's about these kids bonding together under circumstances and growing, and then the mystery starts to take over. It's really, really fantastic. And I love that it was set in the world of today, that these kids' problems were all kids' problems. It kind of reminded me of those YA books of the late 60s and early 70s, like that kind of Paul Zindel feel to it, like The Pig Man. And I'm showing my age when I say that, so I apologize. But
that's okay. I go way back, right? My first book came out in 1978, so that's almost all the way back there. But it's I think it's above all a fish out of water story, and I think that most kids sort of feel like fish out of water a lot.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah, and you definitely encapsulate that with the four narrators. It's really, really lovely. So let's talk a little bit about the genre itself, because detective fiction began a long, long time ago with Edgar Allan Poe. And you might even say that, Oedipus Rex is kind of like a detective story, who's caused the plague in Thebes. So it's been around a while, but what is it about the mystery story that still appeals to us? And how do we continue to make new discoveries within the structure of the genre? Let's go in alphabetical order here so we're not interrupting each other. Zeno, you want to take that question first?
I think one of the fun things about this type of story is the reader has the opportunity to sort of solve it before the characters in the book. And I think if you set it up to where you let the reader think that maybe they could come up with a solution first, either whether by sitting back and thinking about it or whatever else, that's really fun for readers. I know I always like it. So I try to plant enough information for the reader to solve it first. But if they can't, they shouldn't feel too bad, because it's usually pretty obscure for everyone.
Elizabeth, you want to take that up?
So yeah, I first of all love that you have identified Oedipus Rex as a mystery. That's brilliant. The Greek drama and Greek mythology is one of my personal early influences, and there's actually a moment in Premeditated where Myrtle has to write lines for a punishment in Greek, and the line that she has to write is, "I will not be hysterical and ridiculous." And ancient Greece did not have a word for hysterical because it's a Victorian back formation using Greek roots. So I contacted a local professor of a classics professor and asked, "Can I have some help? I don't speak ancient Greek. Can I have some help with this?" And she gave me two options for "I will not be hysterical and ridiculous." And one of them had the root word is "I will not behave like a Maenad," who are the mad women who follow Dionysus. And I was like, sold, you had me at Maenad. And so that's it. Now what she's writing is, "I will not be ridiculous, nor will I rave like a Maenad." But sorry, I got off track there. So it's interesting because to me, in a lot of ways, both as a reader and a writer, every story is a mystery. Mm-hmm. Because you're trying to sort of anticipate what's going to happen next, and there should be a little bit of suspense of not knowing how all the ends are going to tie together. My editor at Scholastic actually way back identified. She said, you're really a mystery writer. Your books have fantasy settings, but mystery plots. And I thought that was a fascinating observation. So to find myself now firmly embracing the mystery genre head on has been tremendous fun. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to do with the Myrtle books, is with this Victorian setting, introduce young readers to the tremendous fun of all of our favorite mystery tropes. And so the first book is a straightforward, cozy neighbor in the garden dies. The second book is set on a train and in a jewel thieves and murder at the seaside. The third book takes place in the holiday season, and the book 4 is a bunch of my favorite mystery TV tropes that have been twisted into the Victorian era. So in addition to what Zeno was saying about letting your readers participate and have that cleverer than the character moment, which is wonderful, particularly for kids, I think just adding that lively, isn't this fun to solve an imaginary murder sort of twist on things.
I love it. Gordon, what do you have to say about the genre?
Well, I love what Elizabeth said about predicting, right? Because I think that kids are just natural predictors, and probably all readers are predictors. So if you create a story where there's this giant important thing that is just unknown, I mean, everyone, but especially young readers, are going to be naturally drawn to sort of try and fill in the holes. The other thing, not wanting to oversimplify, but I do a lot of presentations with kids, go into schools, and I talk about mystery writing as, really the key trait you need to be a good mystery writer is you need to love messing with people. Because I think that when you write a mystery, you're messing with people, right? You start out, you know exactly who did it, right? The reader doesn't. So you throw a few clues out there, but you don't want it to be too easy. You throw a few red herrings out there. If you are the kind of kid or the kind of writer who loves messing with people, mystery is the genre for you.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because, I teach playwriting for the Maryland State Arts Council. And whenever the class is required to write a mystery story, they're always very interested in that. I always tell the kids, you're essentially telling two different stories. You're telling the story of the detective in the present, but you're also telling the story of the past. And how that exposition comes out and when it comes out is a major part of the story. So in your writing process, when you're writing a mystery, how much of the past do you map out before setting forth in the present? We'll go in order again. I'll start with Zeno.
I sort of tend to feel my way through a story, and so I don't necessarily start off with a lot of backstory. I let the plot and the characters in particular sort of take me where they're going, and then I'll turn around and sort of backfill anything that's necessary. But I don't really get into elaborate outlining and planning ahead of time. So there's a certain spontaneity, and sometimes that means I do have to go back and rewrite things or restructure things so it fits this new idea, or the nature of a character will change in order to bring in this new backstory. But right, I sort of tend to do it intuitively and then go back and fix it all later.
Great, Elizabeth.
it all later is, I mean, that's 80%, that's 80% of our work, isn't it? You know, and especially in mysteries where your dominoes have to line up, and you know, you're dumping them out on the table and you're sort of arranging them. I'm thinking in particular because I've just turned in a manuscript, and I can see where we're going to have to be shuffling pieces around. As a reader, you know, I discovered early on as a writer that as a fan, as a consumer of story, backstory is everything to me. If you give me a fascinating backstory to like with Oedipus Rex again, it's that origin story that's influencing, that's infiltrating, that's turning all the mechanisms of the story today, that fires me up like nothing else. And so I've actually had to, I once wrote a book that was too much backstory, not enough front story. And so that's sitting on a burner waiting for me to figure out how to, like, no reader is going to care quite as much about this backstory as you are. With the Myrtle books in particular, each book is different, and they're inspired a lot by, in some cases, real historical events or themes or issues like the sensational press, things like that. And I'll pull the research that I'm doing from those incidents combined with the setting that I've chosen for the new book. So I think most of the Myrtle books start with, here's the kind of mystery that I want to write. I want to write one that's set on a train. I want to write one that's set at Christmas time. And then I fill in from there with ideas that have nothing at all to do with trains and Christmas, but came up in my research, and then I kind of mush them all together.
That's great. Gordon, take us through your process.
Well, I'm definitely way too much of a control freak not to have that whole backstory laid out. That's why, Zeno, I got to take my hat off to you, because it would absolutely like freak me out to sort of not know how the clues in the present are going to sort of reveal the past in advance. And I might act like a Mænad. And the one thing you don't want to ever do is to be caught acting like a Mænad, being hysterical. So I'm a planner. You know, I like to know where I'm going, and I like to sort of, you know, I don't need to know everything in terms of the characters and how that's going to lay out, but in terms of how the mystery is going, how the mystery is going to be solved and how it happened in the past, those are things that I need to know before I start when I'm incorporating mystery into a book.
That's great. Well, I would love to. Oh yeah, Zeno, you want to add something?
I was just going to respond to what he just said, 'cause I thought it was really interesting. He said that you know, it would sort of freak him out not to have things in place before he created all his mysteries, and that's true. And it would be the same way for me, because I'm not really an outliner or planner in that way. I sort of recognize that that's a problem and try to play to the story's strengths. Like in the Library of Ever books, everything is governed by kind of a dream world logic, like an Alice in Wonderland sort of logic. And that kind of allows me to spontaneously come up with things. Whereas if I was trying to write something that had a more straightforward real world logic to it, I'd probably fail because I would not have planned everything out like Gordon does. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of adapting the stories I write to the style that I have, which is not a heavily front-loaded planning style. But,
and much respect, you know, I mean, to be able to do it like that. And the other thing I do agree is that it seems like you've sort of embraced a certain amount of chaos in your process. And I think sometimes we're better writers when we're a little bit when we're a little bit afraid that it might not work out, that you sort of feel this might crash and burn. I might not be able to do this. So much respect on that.
And there is a wonderful adventure quality to this book as well, not just mystery, and the fantasy elements, the Alice in Wonderland elements are prevalent and really wonderful. And it's not to say that, and I just asked your own personal thing. I'm not saying one is better than the other. What our process is, I'm a very well organized, map everything out kind of writer, but Sam Shepard as a playwright. He types up 200 pages, then throws them away and starts over. And he has one more Pulitzer Prize than I will ever get. So it is just the nature of, the beast and the individual writer's process. And I think it's good for kids to understand, those kids who want to be writers, is, you can do all the pre-writing that they want you to do in school, or you can just discover along the way, and you can have a successful career as an author in either sense. In the end, it's all about the story. Elizabeth, you want to?
So I used to tell my students that there's no wrong way to write a book, and after a couple of rough drafts, that really finally came together into something amazing. My philosophy is now there's no right way to write a book. There's just a lot of there's a lot of mess and like the domino analogy, you throw everything onto the table to see what you have, and then you start manipulating the pieces. Yeah. But really, whatever gets you from chapter 1 to the end, go with it.
Absolutely. I would love to hear you read from your work, and I'm sure a lot of the kids would love to hear this too. Zeno, could we hear a little bit of Rebel in the Library of Ever?
Yes, actually, the passage I prepared was from the first book.
Oh, great!
So it sort of sets the stage for people who aren't familiar with the series.
I love it. That way, because we want people to buy the whole series. We definitely do.
Yes, you can read the books separately, but I think it's better to read them in order. So in the first book, Lenora has been stuck for the summer. Her parents have gone off to have a European adventure without her, and they've left her with this horrible nanny who's very unpleasant, and Lenora doesn't get along with her at all. Lenora tricks the nanny into taking her to the local library, where she escapes from the nanny's clutches and tries to find the children's section on her own. Instead, she finds herself in a little mini adventure where she sort of rescues this boy from this terrible person who's trying to stop him from reading. And she hears a loud crack. She turns around, and where there was just a blank wall before, she sees this giant archway with a tunnel leading off into darkness. And she goes through the archway, through the tunnel, and comes out onto a bridge where she gets her first view of this vast otherworldly library that she's in. I'm just going to read what she sees after she comes through the tunnel onto the bridge. The bridge spanned a vast round tower. On either side of Lenora, 2 soaring walls of books curved around to meet again in the distance on the faraway end of the bridge. All along the walls were hundreds of those rolling ladders people use to reach tall bookshelves. The ladders clacked and squeaked, sliding along busily, with librarians climbing up and down them and plucking books from the shelves or putting them back. They were coming in and out of doors, thousands of doors, set in stone walls between the unending shelves. Here and there were broad balconies with librarians hurrying along past circular windows the size of Ferris wheels, their arms full of books. None of them took any notice of Lenora as she gazed at all this in astonishment. She threw back her head. The shelves rose higher than the eye could see. Sunlight beamed in from more giant windows set haphazardly in the walls. There were more bridges, too, like the one she was on, arching gracefully between the walls in all directions. She could see round shapes floating past the shelves, too far away to make out exactly, but they reminded her of balloons. Gathering herself, she trotted to a railing and leaned over to look down. There was no end to the walls below either, but she could see more stone bridges down and down, with specks crossing the lowest ones that must be other people. She staggered back dizzily as a blimp rose into view, with an elegant wooden cabin attached beneath. Through its portholes, she could see it was full of bookshelves, too. A librarian navigated the blimp by a wheel like a sailing ship's mounted at the helm. Lenora walked a little farther along the bridge until she got to a place where she could have a good look through one of the gigantic round windows in the tower's walls. She saw the outside walls of several more towers, like the one she was in, she supposed, and besides those, the tops of all kinds of other buildings, like pyramids and stately columned edifices that looked like, well, she couldn't recall the name, but it was a building on a hill in Greece. All these were closely connected by bridges and webs of strange glass tubes through which dark shapes, she couldn't tell what from this far away, sped along. That's her first view into the library. It's the scene depicted on the cover, and it's the intro to the series.
That's beautiful. I love it. And, you know, when Lenora explores the library in the second book, I've not read the first one, I apologize, but when she comes across information, which I absolutely love, and there's a lot of general knowledge woven into your story along the way. In addition to the main story. In this one, we see Avogadro's number, the ancient Mississippian city of Cahokia, which I had to look up, by the way. I'd never heard of it before. I was like, that seems a little too real. I look it up, and now, of course, because I search for it on Wikipedia, it's coming up in everything now, my news feed, everything.
Yeah. I'm sorry if I may. One of the things that a lot of reviewers have said in their reviews is make sure you have Google nearby when you're reading this book. So you're going to want to look up so many things. I love that.
It's spectacular. Now, how much of that stuff do you plan in advance, or is that something like, you know, is that just us like, you know what, I'm going to come. I need something interesting here, and and there's the cat.
Hey, cat.
Is that Peony? Is that your Peony, Elizabeth?
I'm sorry, I had muted because he's being bossy and loud. No, that is not Peony, but you know, we have a number of feline muses around.
I see. I apologize, Zeno. I interrupted. But how much of the general knowledge do you go into it saying like I would like to teach the kids about X, Y, and Z, or you discover these things?
No, I usually. I have a few different things. I have a huge file with all kinds of very unusual, strange, but true facts in them. And sometimes if I can't solve, like I've gotten my heroine into a predicament that I can't figure out how to get her out of, I'll just look through these things and say, what could she use here? What kind of strange approach could she use to get out of the situation? Like sometimes, you know, she'll find herself trapped on a Roman sailing ship in the Mediterranean 2,000 years ago. And she's got to figure out something in this situation that's going to help her escape from that. So some other, you know, strange but true fact will come along and she'll grab onto that and use it to escape. So it's somewhat spontaneous. Usually these are things I filed away in my mental storage space to use later. But the flexibility of the book's dreamlike structure allows me to use almost anything as a tool to move the story forward. So that's pretty fun when I'm writing it.
Yeah, I love it. It's very, very effective and fantastic. So, Elizabeth, now that we've met your cat, let's hear a little bit about the amazingly brilliant Myrtle Hardcastle. What do you plan to read for us?
I'm actually going to also read the scene depicted on the cover. And it happens to be the scene that contains the line that you read.
Yeah.
Which is a nice little, not a spontaneous segue there. But I think Myrtle and Lenore seem like they are kindred spirits because the Myrtle books are full of footnotes of odd facts that Myrtle chooses to share with the reader at a given moment. And we will see that in this passage as well. So this is chapter 18, and it begins, as all the chapters in all the Myrtle books do, with an epigraph by the erudite H.M. Hardcastle.
Now, if I may just ask, so because this was something I was thinking of asking, but since you brought up the epigraphs, Myrtle is the H.M. Hardcastle. in question. I don't know when she's written this book that is always referred to, but here's the thing. She always refers to an investigator as a man.
Well, it's 1893, and she knows that.
Okay.
So it's one of those things that I want kids to recognize. And maybe a younger reader isn't necessarily going to have the experience to stop and analyze this, but on repeat reads or as they kind of get into things, it's one of those things that, especially as a female, that you notice in the world as it happens, and also. As a nerdy word person, it is a little awkward. Our language doesn't have a neutral pronoun, and so the she/he situation seems a little not period appropriate. And Myrtle recognizes the fact that as a female investigator, she is out of step with other investigators in the world. So that just felt more natural to me when leaning into the Victorian nature of the subject matter.
Definitely more period. So forgive me for interrupting.
No, that's okay. So we'll start. So in the scene that is happening here, Myrtle's neighbor has been murdered. Miss Woodhouse, an eccentric gardener and wealthy spinster who lives next door. Myrtle's chief suspect in the crime is Miss Woodhouse's niece, Priscilla, who apparently has designs on, romantic designs on Myrtle's widowed father, and she is not the stepmother that Myrtle would choose. And as this scene begins, Priscilla has come to dinner at Myrtle's house. So, the other thing that we need to know for this scene is that Peony the cat, when she meows, it sounds like she's saying no. So most of Peony's dialogue, excuse me, is no, no. So the morbid curiosity about what was happening in that dining room among Father, Aunt Helena, and Priscilla felt like ants crawling under my petticoats. I'd stationed myself at the top of the stairs, straining to hear, but could make out nothing useful. Peony perched beside me, serenading the dinner party with an undulating song of woe and betrayal. I thought she was spectacular. Until Cook stepped into the foyer, dressed tonight as a butler. The master requests that the cat be removed, she intoned. No, said Peony. I gave a sigh and untwined my legs from the balusters. Yes, ma'am. I scooped up Peony, who responded with one parting utterance shrill enough to break wine glasses, and carried her into the dark schoolroom. The curtains were still open, and I noticed lights on across the way at Redgrave's. Some lights were normal, even with Priscilla over here. No one wanted to come home to an absolutely dark house. These lights were upstairs, in empty bedrooms, not down in the main areas of the house. And the lights shouldn't move. As I watched, one set of windows went dark. A moment later, the adjacent room brightened as someone turned up the gas. I chewed on my thumbnail, trying to decide what to do. I had 3 options, 2 of which were sensible. 1, notify Miss Judson, that's her governess. 2, alert the diners downstairs, one of whom would certainly be concerned by nefarious goings-on at Redgrave's, but to whom I owed no duty of care. 3, investigate on my own. Dear reader, I will allow you to deduce what choice I made. Before I could talk myself out of it, I tightened my bootlaces, checked that my skirt hems weren't likely to be stepped upon, and loaded up my bag. Onto my head went my deerstalker cap. Last, I opened the cabinet and retrieved the key with the fleur-de-lis handle. Peony, watching my preparations, almost gave me away. She twined about my ankles, complaining, and ignored all my admonitions to shush. Do you want to come? Yes, she replied, and trotted out of the schoolroom down the back stairs to the scullery door. Thus we prepared to commit the most egregious transgression of which a young lady of quality is capable. I was about to go outside alone after dark. Dear reader, surely I need not enumerate the dangers posed by my present course of action. They are drilled into every girl from the cradle by every possible means. I knew all about Spring-Heeled Jack, the fiend who stalked the pages of the Penny Dreadfuls, not to mention Jack the Ripper, the fiend who'd stalked the real-life streets of London only a few years ago. There were body snatchers and burkers, footnote, named for Mr. Burke and Mr. Hare, the notorious Scottish grave robbers turned murderers. Press gangs waiting to drug the unsuspecting and ship them off to sea, and all manner of deviants ready to defile the innocent. I was not certain what this last meant precisely, except that it was practically guaranteed to occur the instant a young lady of quality touched her boot heel to the moonlit earth.
Yay, one of my favorite phrases in there. I love it. Really, really beautiful. And, you know, and the fact that it's an English girl in the 1890s, because that was when women really started demanding equality before the law, you know, with the suffragettes, universities, Mrs. Pankhurst, Beatrice Webb. And we see Myrtle struggle against the limits that society places on her. But something else that you've done a wonderful job on is that you've made the story more inclusive with regard to race than any book or play written during that time, with Miss Judson and Dr. Munjal. Can you tell us a little bit about your choices there?
Well, one of the things is that finally, at last, we're seeing a much stronger push toward inclusivity in children's literature. Mm-hmm. We have a long way to go still, particularly in the level of gatekeepers in the industry. But most importantly, from my perspective, as a white woman writing, I would hate for anyone to feel unwelcome in one of my books. My books might not be for every reader, but I want every reader to feel as if they could be there. And my heroine is white and middle class, and I'm white and middle class. But the world, the Western world, and particularly the English, the British Empire and the home country of England, has always had people of color, people who are not English, immigrants. Those people of all races, ethnicities, and origins have always been part of the English population, even in the Victorian era, not always as servants or slaves or members of the lower class. They're just not always as visible to us. And so without maybe saying here's a book about members of other cultures, other origins, and hammering that home, we're just cracking open a little bigger window here so that white kids can see a different view, so that kids of color can see a glimpse at someone more like themselves, role that they might not often have seen in a Victorian novel.
Yeah, and I think that's great, because Gaithersburg is the most diverse small city in America, so it's a wonderful thing for us to have, and thank you. Gordon, your book has 4 narrators, each of them a member of Team Lizard. Who will be narrating the section you're reading for us?
Okay, well, I'm actually gonna go with the cover scene as well. So the lizard Needles is a baby lizard of indeterminate backstory who the 4 narrators kind of adopt, and far be it from me to throw out any kind of spoiler in a mystery panel, but I will just say that the truth about needles is very much tied into everything that is mysterious at the oasis of mind and body wellness. So needles is originally discovered in the bath, which is a natural hot spring at the oasis. And this is the first appearance of the bath in the book. It's Grace reading, but it's actually Jet's first experience. Jet Baranoff, that's our tech Titans kid in the bath. Okay. Okay, the water in the bath is heated by magma far underground. Sometimes you get the feeling that if you dig around with your toe, you could burn it off because the magma must be right there. There's a cloud of steam over the bath, even on the hottest days. But once you get used to it, you'll experience total relaxation. A raucous bella jars me out of my thoughts. Cannonball! There's the sound of pounding feet, and a figure is airborne above the bath, blotting out the sun. Jet hits the water in the middle of everyone, scattering kids and raising a splash like a meteor strike. Wait for it, I tell myself. The scream comes almost immediately, ripped straight from the gut, an eruption of pure shock and anguish. Yow! That's when we learn that Jet Baranoff can fly. He lifts out of the burning water like a submarine-launched missile and scrambles up onto the rocks, trembling and pink all over. That guy, Matt, his assistant or whatever, comes rushing over. Geez, what happened? They tried to kill me, Jet howls. Who? Matt gawks at his boss's son, who is crouched like a wounded animal in his soaked shorts and t-shirt. All the kids are laughing, including me, especially me. It's 1 billion degrees in there, Jet whimpers. Why didn't anybody warn me? We thought you might figure it out, I snicker. You know, from the sign that says hot spring. I need a doctor, Jet tells his companion. Tell the pilot to fire up the Gulf Stream, and we'll need a chopper, stat, to get me to Little Rock Airport. Matt is patient. Are you finished? He asks. Get a grip. You're not dead. Everything's still attached. All the other kids are in the same water that you were in, and none of them need medevac. And I think what I love about that scene, I think, is that, you know, on the one hand, a lot of readers will sort of immediately be extremely jealous of Jet, right? Like his dad's a billionaire, his family's famous. But I wanted to show the extent to which he really was kind of the loneliest kid in the world. You know, his parents are too busy for him. He's been raised basically by nannies when he was little, and, you know, kind of tutors and Fuego employees trying to like kiss up to the boss. So when he gets to the oasis of mind and body wellness, he can't stand it. He hates it more than anybody else. But at the same time, you kind of recognize that this is really the best chance he has ever had to be a normal kid with a normal life and real friends. And
something that that's really struck me about it, the fact that it's written in the first person present. You know, we are seeing Jet's growth as it's happening, as he narrates it. Because if it's written in first person past tense, he will be narrating from that point of growth. And so it was a fantastic choice as we see him get. And something else that I really loved about it as well. All right, I mean, Sherlock Holmes was not the nicest guy in the world, right? Really, really annoying, obnoxious. And Jet is that way too. Is it a nod to Sherlock Holmes to come up with this detective who is superior to everyone?
Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, absolutely. It was my reference to Sherlock Holmes. You know, I just sort of felt like, you know, that he kind of came to the whole experience with a chip on his shoulder, right? And some of the chip on his shoulder was just the privilege that he comes from. Even for people who are privileged, he's privileged. But also some of it was just the fact that he's angry at what's happened to him. So he brings a certain kind of certainly like skepticism and a little bit of anger to his process of sleuthing.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's wonderful. It's really wonderful the way you used the four narrators. And I don't. If I say anything, I'm going to give it all away because I would want to talk about this book all day. I just really loved it so much. So we should probably start wrapping up. So let me just ask very quickly, Zeno and Elizabeth. How long are your series going to continue? Is it going to be like Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys where it goes on forever? Or is there an overriding arc or end point where you go, it's like, yeah, I've done 30 of these, I'm done. Zeno, let's start with you.
Well, I had mapped out and sort of vaguely about a 5 to 6 book arc for the entire series. But the pandemic and the disruption to publishing has disrupted a lot of plans. So I'm not sure what's going to happen next. I do have a third book partially written, and ideally, the series will be able to continue. We're gonna have to see what happens.
Excellent. All right. Fingers crossed. Can't wait for it. Elizabeth?
So as I mentioned, I've just turned in book 4, and that's coming out not next year, but the year after. I've lost track of what year that is. And I told my editor, or I told my agent when I submitted the first Myrtle book, that I could happily write nothing but Myrtle books for the rest of my life. Myrtle's 12, and so I've spaced the mysteries so far that they're every 2 months-ish. But I don't know what it would be like to watch her grow up. I feel like I don't know. We'll just see what happens. My editor has said that she pictures me sitting on the porch of the old author's home, still writing murder mysteries. So,
well, you mentioned Woodhouse in that's the victim in the first one. I keep thinking P.G. Woodhouse, who was doing Jeeves and Wooster up until the time he was like 90 years old. So why not?
Why not? Right? Yes. We could see. Myrtle gets a telephone in book 4, and maybe she'll witness the First World War, maybe the votes for women. We don't know. We'll just see.
Oh, that's exciting. Gordon, what are you working on now? And everyone got to talk about their series.
Okay. So my next book is actually done. It is called Linked. This is not the book, but the ARC, right? The advanced reader copy. So it will be coming out on July 20th. And it is the story of a little bit more serious than Unplugged. It's the story of kids at a middle school who are appalled by acts of racist vandalism around their school and decide to get the entire town making a paper chain 6 million links long in honor of the victims of the Holocaust.
Wow. I love that. That sounds fantastic. July 26th, you said?
July 20th. Always
July 20th.
Tuesday.
All right. July 20th.
Always Tuesday.
Yeah. Wonderful. I that's fantastic. Thank you very much. I just want to, again, thank our 3 authors. Thanks the Gaithersburg Book Festival. And I encourage everyone to find these books at a local bookseller. It is Rebel in the Library of Ever by Zeno Alexander, Premeditated Myrtle and its sequels by Elizabeth C. Buntz, and Unplugged by Gordon Korman, and of course, Gordon's new book, Linked, which will come out in July. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
That was just an amazing and fun discussion. I can't thank you enough, Elizabeth, Zeno, Gordon, and John, for that terrific presentation. And now, future authors, are you ready to write? Here are today's story starters. Choose your favorite or write about them all. Number 1, imagine a giant box is delivered to your front doorstep with your name on it. What's inside and what happens once you open it? Number 2, write a story using these 3 words: detective, piano, and pizza. Number 3, you are the security guard at the zoo and someone has stolen a rhinoceros. How do you track down the thief? Send your finished stories to gbfstories@gaithersburgmd.gov and you'll be entered into a random drawing for a special prize.
And to all of you book lovers watching at home, I have to thank you for joining us tonight for this presentation. We have an amazing lineup of children's authors still to come, and you don't want to miss one. Furthermore, for those of you local to the Gaithersburg area, you have to be sure to check out the 4 GBF story walks, which are installed all around the city. Go to Gaithersburgbookfestival.org and look over the author presentation schedule and story walk locations so you can plan the rest of your festival month. Have a great evening all, and remember, keep reading and keep writing.